Thank you to the T5 peeps, Bob the Dragon, Datamagnet, Cat Crab Lobster, Dark Machine, Astraya the Dreamer, Mezec, Feudic Jarl, and Casper Arnholtz. Thank you very much. Story number 1. Powder, written by IAreGoodAtRighting.
This is your last chance, Mayfly. Disband your army and submit to Elven rule before being eradicated from the history books. God King LanScaper spat at the feet of the human's mare and smiled. Doge Mezec shifted in his saddle and scanned the elven army behind the God King's escort. Thousands of soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder in perfect formation, sunlight dancing on their conical silver helmets. Well, you might not agree to trade and peaceful coexistence. Neither I nor the Republic hold ill will to the elven people. But as Penzans value our freedom, what you propose is slavery, and human backs will never break to the whip. The God King grimaced. Your commitment is admirable, but pointless. Look at your situation. You face the most disciplined army in the known world. They are led by me. The God King made a flourishing gesture to himself. The greatest general to ever live. I won more victories than you've seen sunrises. He swung his head back and laughed. Mezec glanced back towards his own army, each man watching their leaders meeting with the Elf King. See these men? They stand here because the alternative, your alternative, is worse than death on the battlefield. I still stand by my offer of... LanScaper drew his sword and pointed it at Mezec, followed by his personal guard. The human escort cocked their muskets and pointed them at the God King and his elves. I am God! LanScaper's sword emitted a radiant golden light, same color as his armor. And the god does not equate himself to short-lived mortals. You say mayflies prefer death over slavery. My army will put that claim to the test. LanScaper stared down each man in the human escort and galloped back to his troops. Mezec cursed and returned to the Penzan army with his own guard in tow. I will not waste your time with a long-winded speech, the God King called out to his men. These mayflies are rabble, a stain on the face of the world. They can't even afford to put a single man in armor, unless they think that cloth will save them from our arrows and spears. We are elves. We are ageless, eternal. The infantry pounded spears against shields and cheered. He turned to face the humans, their white and blue uniforms sticking out against the forest's edge. Archers, advance at walk. Infantry, keep behind them. Show no mercy. Elves marched across the open field in perfect unison. Billowing clouds of white smoke appeared from behind the human lines. Then a boom LanScaper felt in his chest. The elves looked around in confusion until cannonballs landed in a tightly packed ranks. Blood and dirt kicked up high in the air all along the formation. The God King furrowed his brow in response. Quick march, he shouted, and kicked his horse to a trot. The cannons fired again and again. Each time, more elves fell, survivors rushing to close the empty ranks. The God King looked back at the dead or dying elves behind the formation and scoffed at the idea of dying to such a foe. Balls skipped across the grassy field, turning the packed formations into living bowling pins. After minutes of constant fire, LanScaper came close enough to see the detail in each cowardly human's face. Archers, halt! Draw arrows! The line of elves stretching across the open field placed arrows upon their bowstrings and pulled back to their cheeks. Look! The human line transformed into a puff of thundering smoke. Archers fell to the ground as they all collapsed in fear, until LanScaper saw holes piercing through their armor, blood leaking from new cracks. His own steed reared into the air and died before it hit the ground. Before being crushed by the horse's weight, LanScaper leapt from the saddle and landed on his feet. Loose! Doge Mezec cursed in anger as arrows rained down onto the human line infantry. he turned his horse to the mounted bugler in his staff. "From a loose formation, I want 3 lines." "Yes, sir." The bugler raised his instrument to his lips and rode up and down the line. A tune played, and the infantry moved in mass, officers shouting and waving their swords in the air. The line turned into a thin checkerboard pattern, with men in the first 2 rows still reloading after their first volley. Another wave of arrows poured in from the sky. Men died instantly or shouted in pain and fell to the ground, though not as many as the first volley. An aide craned his head in an attempt to look over the archers. "Will the elves not attack with the infantry? They think they can pull our victory with arrows alone." Mezec paused as the cannons and infantry unleashed a wall of lead again. "Though, after sprinting across that field in full gear, the whole army must be exhausted. When they realize they're losing the ranged battle, they'll try getting close." The archers' arms quaked well before the quivers emptied. Arrows wavered midair, falling shorter of the humans each volley. "What are your hearts made of?" Lbry roared to the dwindling line of elves with bows. "Weaklings! Infantry with me!" He raised his sword of light high in the air and charged forward. The elven spearmen passed through the line of archers and moved with the God King. The humans stopped shooting at the sight of the horde charging elves. "A rout is near!" the God King cackled and sprinted forward. "Press the attack, brothers!" Joy filled his heart until the cannons exploded again. Instead of heavy metal balls, the elves were met with countless grape-sized pellets. Swaths of elves fell around Lbry. He screamed with hate. Thousands of elves returned to the display, filled with another burst of energy. The infantry sprinted towards the idle human line. Private Giordano shook with adrenaline and fear as the elves drew closer. "Rank 3, fixed bayonets," the Doge called out from his horse further down the line. Giordano fumbled around with the blade and fitted at the end of his musket. "Rank on 1, fire!" the Doge shouted from his horse. 2 lines in front of him, men raised their muskets and fired. Giordano couldn't see the destruction, but he could certainly hear it. Everyone in front rank ran between the wide spacing in the line and became a new 3rd rank. They pulled bayonets from their sheaths and fixed them onto their guns. "Rank 2, fire!" A wall of smoke shrouded the elves, but based on the angry roar, they were still coming closer. "I'm a shoemaker, damn it! Do you expect me to kill 1,000-year-old elven soldiers?" The 2nd rank hurried to the back and fixed their bayonets. The elves emerged from the white cloud, each one clad in shining armor from head to toe. An elf at the head taller than the rest charged directly at Giordano with a sword of light raised above his armor, gold instead of the usual silver. Their eyes locked, and the elf smiled. "Rank 3, fire!" Giordano screamed and pulled the trigger. Cracks from every musket along the line blended with his own. The elf's smile turned to shock, his sword of light impaling itself in the dirt. Each charge slowed to a halt and stared at the clean hole at the center of his breastplate. He touched the opening with disbelief. Blood poured from the wound and mixed with gold. The elf crashed into the ground face first. The elves around him, moments away from combat, skidded to a halt. "The God King is dead," one elf gasped. The spearmen glanced at each other wordlessly. What elves were left after the final volley turned around and ran back into the smoke. After the center formation collapsed, the spearmen on the flanks didn't last long before joining their escaping comrades. Giordano and the rest of the humans braced for a second charge that never came. The wall of smoke cleared, showing nothing but fallen or routing elves. "Victory!" Doge Mezec shouted. The line of humans came to life with cheer. End of story. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you do, please consider supporting the author, even by popping over and leaving a thumbs up or a nice comment, just to show your appreciation for the story. However, if you wish to support this channel, there are links down below which will help immensely. I will see you all in the next one, and until then, I hope
that you have a fantastic day. Cheers.